Good evening, I'm Dr Waktang and you are watching A News. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. Supreme Court hands Trump major win, curtails nationwide judicial blocks on executive actions. China and the United States finalize a framework agreement on critical issues like tariffs and rare earth exports. Diplomatic momentum grows in Gaza conflict, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says. The U.S. Supreme Court has delivered a major legal victory to Donald Trump, limiting the power of federal judges to issue nationwide injunctions against executive actions. Trump celebrated the 6-3 decision as a giant win on his social media platform. The case stemmed from his attempt to end birthright citizenship, but focused on judicial authority rather than the policy itself. Liberal justices dissented, warning the ruling weakens judicial checks on the presidency. The decision is expected to make it easier for future administrations to implement controversial policies. After a month of tension and stalled negotiations, the United States and China have taken a major step toward easing their trade dispute. The two sides have finalized a framework agreement that touches on critical issues like tariffs, rare earth exports, and visa restrictions.
China on Friday confirmed the details of a framework to implement the Geneva trade talks consensus with the US, following President Donald Trump's announcement that a new trade agreement had been signed earlier this week. The Chinese Commerce Ministry stated it would approve export applications for controlled items in line with regulations, while Washington agreed to cancel a series of restrictive measures. Though Trump gave few specifics, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said the deal was signed and sealed, with both sides agreeing to expedite rare earth mineral shipments to the US. These critical materials are essential for sectors like electric vehicles, semiconductors and defense, and have been a focal point of the negotiations. The US and China have been locked in a trade conflict since 2018, when Washington began imposing steep tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, citing unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. Beijing responded with its own tariffs and restrictions, sparking a tit-for-tat trade war that disrupted global markets and strained bilateral ties. Talks in Geneva in May and follow-ups in London laid the groundwork for this week's agreement, which aims to ease tensions after years of friction. While China has accelerated approvals of some rare earth exports, it continues to vet buyers to prevent diversion to military use, contributing to delays. In return, the US has agreed to roll back certain punitive tariffs and pause visa restrictions for Chinese students. However, some measures, particularly imports and duties on steel and aluminum, remain in place.
Vietnam's top garment exporters, many with workforces made up mostly of women, are hoping their talks with the United States don't derail their businesses. One major sewing company based in Ho Chi Minh City says it's taking steps to protect itself as global trade tensions rise.
Inside this bustling factory in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, women make up the majority of the workforce, powering one of Southeast Asia's biggest garment exporters. Thai Son SP exports clothing for brands across Europe, Australia, Canada, and crucially the United States. Last year, Vietnam's textile exports to the US reached $16.6 billion, making it the country's largest market. But that could be under threat. As the Trump administration reopens trade talks with the country, the company fears that new tariffs could disrupt a fragile supply chain. To stay ahead, Thai Son is diversifying, attending fashion expos and seeking clients in China, Kazakhstan and the Middle East. For now, production lines keep moving, but for companies like this one, the outcome of negotiations could shape the future of thousands of workers.
One industry that is bracing for the impact of Trump's reciprocal tariffs is India's traditional hand-woven Kashmiri carpet sector. Industry insiders say exports to the United States are vital to the livelihoods of many of those who work in the sector, with many worried that if President Donald Trump's tariffs were to come into effect next month, this could be a nail in the coffin for an already dying craft.
Yasir Shah has sold hand-knotted Kashmiri carpets for more than 2 decades, with many carpets from this shop going to the United States, a key market for him. But he says demand has already started to drop off from America because of President Trump's tariff threats, leaving businesses like his in a tight spot.
In our carpet section, very less business, last few months, because it affects a lot in our business. Maybe 5%, 6%, 3%, it's okay. But 27%, it's very difficult to pay.
President Trump has threatened to levy 27% tariffs on all Indian imports starting July 9th. Official data shows that carpet shipments to the US make up half of the sector's global exports, worth $2 billion. Yasir exports 200 carpets to the US annually, with 150 craftspeople working to make these pieces for him in Kashmir.
It's very difficult to common people who are doing all this work. It affects them a lot, and their families also suffer, because it's a survival for them. It's a survival for them.
Each of Yasir's carpets sell for up to $3,500 and can take more than 6 months to make. He says there's no appetite to buy such expensive products locally, and he's worried the tariff could also push American buyers towards cheaper machine-made carpets. He says it's why carpet weaving, a skill that has been passed down through the generations, is dying.
The art maybe die after maybe 10 years, 15 years after, maybe no more craft, because we are not encouraging them. We are not supporting them. We must encourage. If they make the carpet, we must encourage them. After 7 months, they work hard, cannot sell. Then no point to make it.
Yasir has been trying to make inroads in Central Asia and Europe, but he says it's been difficult. He's now pinned his hopes on the ongoing trade talks between India and the US, with New Delhi pushing hard for the removal of all reciprocal tariffs.
If you look into the US should not have any hesitation to provide free access to the Indian carpet, because they are not manufacturing carpet. We are nowhere a threat to them.
Yasir hopes more can be done to protect traditional industries from bilateral trade upheavals. Else, he warns, Kashmir's legacy craft will continue to fray, one knot at a time.
China's Foreign Minister Wang is set to begin a week-long diplomatic mission across Europe, with stops in Brussels, Berlin and Paris. The visit comes just ahead of the China-EU Leaders Summit in Beijing next month and is aimed at easing trade tensions and strengthening ties with key European powers. Our Mahnur Maktoum has more from Beijing.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is expected to embark on a week-long journey to Brussels, Germany and France starting June 30th in a strategic diplomatic push ahead of the upcoming China-EU Leaders Summit in Beijing in July. In Brussels, Wang Yi will lead the 13th round of China-EU high-level dialogue along with the EU Foreign Policy Chief, Belgian Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. The talks will address the ongoing trade friction, geopolitical situation and future cooperation. He will then head to Germany, where he will co-chair the China-Germany high-level dialogue on diplomacy and security, amid the growing debate in Berlin over reducing economic reliance on China. His next stop will be Paris, where he will lead the China-France high-level dialogue on people-to-people exchanges, reflecting China's soft power agenda. These visits reflect China's efforts to stabilize relations with the major EU powers, especially as the economic and geopolitical climate continues to intensify. Mahnur Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
A tense day of diplomacy in Brussels has wrapped up, with European Union leaders tackling a wide-ranging agenda: trade tensions with the United States, sanctions on Russia, and rising pressure over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Transatlantic trade, the war in Ukraine and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza topped the agenda as European Union leaders gathered for a one-day summit in Brussels on Thursday. Top of the agenda, a possible trade agreement with the United States. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen confirmed that Brussels has now received Washington's latest proposal.
Today, we received the latest US document for further negotiations. We are assessing it as we speak right now. So our message today is clear. We are ready for a deal. At the same time, we are preparing for the possibility that no satisfactory agreement is reached. This is why we consulted on a rebalancing list, and we will defend the European interest as needed. In short, all options remain on the table.
The renewed push for a deal comes ahead of a July deadline that could trigger sweeping new tariffs. EU leaders say European industries are already feeling the pressure.
I pointed out the chemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, mechanical engineering, the steel, aluminium and automotive industries. They are currently all burdened with such high tariffs that it really endangers the companies.
France echoed calls for urgency, but with caution. President Emmanuel Macron warned against accepting what he called an unbalanced deal and insisted the EU must preserve its regulatory autonomy.
We want to conclude quickly because it is in our collective interest, but we do not want to conclude quickly at any cost.
While EU officials remain hopeful, the White House has suggested that the tariff deadline could still be extended, though it's ultimately up to President Donald Trump. Negotiators on both sides say talks are ongoing. Beyond trade, EU leaders endorsed a 6-month extension of sanctions against Russia. The new package, expected to be formally approved in the coming days, comes as Russia's war in Ukraine enters its 4th year. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the summit via video link, urging greater military and financial support. But his country's stalled EU accession remains blocked by Hungary amid ongoing tensions with Brussels. Meanwhile, Hungary and Slovakia voiced concerns over the EU's roadmap to phase out Russian fossil fuel imports by 2027, seeking guarantees to protect their energy security. Diplomats say a compromise could unlock the sanctions package by Friday. On the Middle East, the summit took a cautious position on Israel's military operations in Gaza. Leaders reviewed a critical EU assessment that cited potential human rights violations, including attacks on hospitals and the obstruction of humanitarian aid. The Brussels summit concluded with EU leaders outlining next steps on trade, sanctions and regional conflicts, ahead of a series of high-level international meetings scheduled for the summer.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed an agreement with the Council of Europe to create a tribunal that would allow for the prosecution of senior Russian officials who have led the war on Ukraine. At the same time, Vladimir Putin will not attend BRICS summit because of international court warrant. The Russian head of state has been the subject of an ICC arrest warrant since 2023 on suspicion of illegally deporting Ukrainian children to Russia. To help us unpack the implications of these developments, we're joined from New York by Julia O'Connell from Dignitas Fund. Julia, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Julia, how does this new tribunal initiative complement or differ from the ongoing investigations at the International Criminal Court?
Well, it's a great question, and let me remind you that on March 17, 2023, Putin was issued an arrest warrant along with Maria Lvova-Belova, who was responsible for abducting Ukrainian children. So the number is 20,000 confirmed cases, and the actual estimates go to 200 to 300,000 of stolen children. So during the NATO summit, International Crime Court issued the tribune, and that addresses not only Putin but all his cronies, everybody who is responsible for the crime of aggression. It's not only crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, crimes, war crimes, but it's specifically crimes of aggression. And that's significant because what it shows to Ukraine, what it shows to the rest of the world that Europe and NATO allies believe that Russia will lose. So what it happens, it's a roadmap. It's very similar to the roadmap to the process that will very similar to the Nuremberg process that happened after the World War II with the Nazi German regime. So this is not only addressing Putin, but addressing everyone who is involved in war crimes and crime of aggression against Ukraine, because the generals they give orders, and just let me remind you about the Mariupol that was leveled to the ground, and theater that had a big letters children around it, and the bomb was killed like right in the middle and killed 600 people inside. Those orders were given not directly by Putin, but by the military generals. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lavrov, who is also on that list, is constantly advocating for Russian actions. He's spreading lies. So all of these people who gave orders should be brought to justice. And this shows that not only it will be brought to justice, but again, that there is a consensus that Russia will lose, and the map for the justice has to be on the table today.
Yulia, then in your opinion, what kind of international support will be essential to ensure the tribunal's legitimacy and functionality?
Right now, as we know, all European NATO countries increased their military spending, their budgets, and part of these budgets, many countries put part of the budget specifically for Ukraine. President Trump was very happy with the increased budgets, and United States is not walking away, just like he said at some point that that United States could walk away. It's not happening because Europe did their part, and United States is staying strong with. So that support comes. Yes, we do still work with the current administration to increase support to Ukraine, but none of the sanctions were lifted from Russia. There is a new package that is on the table. It's hopefully will go through, but it's right this moment putting pressure at least on Russia. At some point, Trump will have to come to realization that conversations with Putin are fruitless, are useless. So it takes a little bit of time, but Europe is stepping up with their defense budgets, and United States is not walking away. So what we have right now.
Yulia O'Connell, thank you very much for your valuable insights and for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A powerful wildfire in Greece has reached residential areas, forcing people to evacuate their homes. The blaze broke out near Palaia Fokaia, a seaside town in East Attica, and is spreading rapidly as authorities take emergency measures. With a high risk of wildfires expected this year, Greece has increased the number of firefighters to a record 18,000 personnel.
A large wildfire that broke out near the coastal town of Palaia Fokaia, about 40 kilometers south of Athens, has spread to residential areas. Strong winds have fueled the spread of the flames, prompting people to leave their homes at 4 seaside towns. With temperatures in the affected area reaching 38 degrees Celsius, the Greek Fire Service has deployed 130 firefighters, supported by 12 water-dropping aircraft and 12 helicopters. Footage shared on social media shows water being dropped onto the flames, with thick smoke rising into the sky. According to official reports, several residential and holiday homes have been completely destroyed. Authorities have not yet released the exact number of evacuees. Due to an increase in wildfires and floods linked to climate change, Greek authorities say it has spent hundreds of millions of euros in recent years to combat natural disasters. The government has also boosted compensation payments and invested in modern firefighting equipment. With a high risk of more wildfires expected this year, Greece has increased the number of firefighters to a record 18,000. Weather forecasts suggest cooler temperatures in the coming days, but the wildfire risk remains high.
To the Middle East now. In his latest message, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country's military victory over Iran has created new opportunities for peace in the region. Our Trent Murray has more from Tel Aviv.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has hinted that his government may be working on some sort of ceasefire agreement within Gaza, as well as an expansion of the Abraham Accords, effectively normalizing relations with further Arab countries. In a short but carefully worded video online, the Prime Minister said that Israel fought with strength against Iran and achieved a great victory. And he has gone on to say that that victory opens up an opportunity for a dramatic expansion of peace agreements. He says that he is working vigorously on that. He goes on to say that along with the release of Israeli hostages and the defeat of Hamas, there is a window of opportunity here that must not be wasted. Now, the timing of this statement is interesting because it comes following media reports suggesting that the Trump administration has been pushing for an end to the war in Gaza as part of an overall plan for the day after the war, one in which Israel maybe will see the expansion of the Abraham Accords. The Prime Minister's office has denied some of those reports in the past few hours, but certainly the rhetoric and the language there we are seeing is that diplomatic conversations are indeed taking place. Earlier in the week, President Trump, speaking in The Hague during the NATO summit, said that he believes that a deal in Gaza is getting very close and that great progress is being made. Similar sentiments from Hamas, who in an interview with the BBC earlier this week said that it is engaged in intensive contacts aimed at reaching a ceasefire agreement. But they did add that they have not received any new proposals so far. This comes, of course, after Egypt and Qatar mediated efforts stalled back in May amid disagreements over the terms of a deal. But it seems the rhetoric both here in Tel Aviv and also across the region suggests that after 630 days of war, diplomatic efforts are indeed being made once again to try and bring an end to the conflict between Hamas and Israel. Trent Murray for A News, Tel Aviv.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said he has seen no intelligence indicating Iran relocated its highly enriched uranium before recent U.S. strikes on its nuclear facilities. His comments follow reports suggesting Iran moved its 60% enriched uranium from Fordo ahead of the attack. Satellite images had shown unusual activity near the site. Hegseth rejected claims that the strikes had a limited impact, insisting that they set back Iran's nuclear program by years. Meanwhile, Iran says no meeting with the United States is planned, contradicting President Donald Trump's claim that the talks were set for the next week. Our Turaj Shirali has more from Tehran.
3 days after a ceasefire between Iran on one side and the US and Israel on the other, Ayatollah Khamenei congratulated Iranians for defeating Israel and for the heavy slap to the US, warning that Iran would strike back if it is attacked. In a televised address, he also said Iran would not surrender over its nuclear program, despite Trump's call. Also, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, in an interview on state TV, denied an upcoming meeting between Iranian and US negotiators next week, as stated by President Trump. Tehran and Washington were scheduled to hold their 6th round of nuclear negotiations mediated by Oman, but it was disrupted by Israel and US attacking Iran's nuclear sites. According to Iran's top diplomat, Israel ruined the talks with the US, and the US ruined the talks with the EU, further complicating the settlement of Iran's nuclear issue. He added that Iran would apply for recognition of Israel and the US as the aggressors and will demand compensation from aggressors after damage assessment is completed. He also said that Iran and the European troika of Germany, France, and the UK are considering a new round of the talks on the 2015 nuclear agreement, also known as the JCPOA. Turachi Alilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
Azerbaijan and China have signed new agreements to boost cooperation in renewable energy and improve Azerbaijan's electricity transmission network. During a visit to Ningbo, Azerbaijani energy minister met with Vice President of China Energy Engineering Corporation to discuss implementing their existing strategic partnership. Talks focused on grid development, joint green energy research and projects in hydro, solar and offshore wind power. Additionally, Azerbaijan's Ministry of Energy signed a separate deal with China's Electric Power Planning and Engineering Institute. Azerbaijan and Iran entering a renewed phase of constructive dialogue. With a new ambassador in place and growing political will on both sides, the two countries are signaling a firm commitment to cooperation despite recent regional tensions.
President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev received the credentials of Mojtaba Demircioglu, Iran's newly appointed ambassador to Azerbaijan. During their meeting, both sides emphasized their commitment to deepening bilateral relations based on friendship, mutual respect, and non-interference. President Aliyev recalled his recent phone call with Iran's president and highlighted the positive reception of Iranian presidential candidate Masoud Pezeshkian's visit to Baku, calling it a turning point in bilateral relations. He also condemned false narratives in the media aimed at damaging ties amid recent Iran-Israel tensions, calling such claims baseless. Ambassador Demircioglu reaffirmed Iran's trust that Azerbaijani territory will never be used against Iran and expressed gratitude for Azerbaijan's support during the recent regional crisis. The two sides also discussed future cooperation across multiple sectors, including trade, culture and infrastructure, with particular focus on the North-South Corridor and Araz River Bridge projects.
Senior military leaders from Azerbaijan and Turkey took part in the Distinguished Observer Day of the International Military Exercise Anatolian Eagle 2025, held at the 3rd Main Jet Base in Konya. This year's exercise saw the active participation of 7 countries and NATO, with 5 additional countries attending as observers. Designed to enhance international military cooperation and joint preparedness, the Anatolian Eagle exercise stimulates near-real combat scenarios to strengthen coordination among participating forces. Tensions erupted at the residence of the Catholicos of all Armenians in Echmiadzin after Armenian security forces attempted to detain Archbishop Mikhail Ajapayan, head of the Shirag diocese, on charges of publicly calling for the overthrow of the constitutional order. National Security Service officers arrived at the Echmiadzin complex today. Their attempt to detain the Archbishop was met with strong resistance from clergy and faithful of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Ajapayan appeared before law enforcement accompanied by his lawyer and Catholicos Garegan II, expressing his readiness to cooperate. However, worshippers blocked the arrest, preventing security forces from taking him into custody. Opposition leader of the Dashnak Sutiun party called on supporters to gather in Echmiadzin to prevent further arrests of clergy. Georgia says its strategic ties with the UK are being damaged. Tbilisi has voiced concern over London's recent sanctions and political statements. Georgian Foreign Minister Mako Bochorishvili has criticized the UK's move to impose sanctions on Georgian citizens, saying it undermines the strategic partnership between the two countries. In a meeting with the British ambassador Gareth Ward, Bochorishvili said the sanctions and public remarks from UK officials appear to interfere with Georgia's internal affairs and judicial process. Tbilisi stressed that external pressure should not politicize ongoing legal cases or affect domestic political dynamics. To unpack the implications of this diplomatic fallout and what it could mean for Georgia's foreign policy and internal politics, we are joined by Dr. Waktang Misaya, head of geopolitical researches of Georgian Strategic Analysis Center from Tbilisi. Mr. Misaya, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, welcome. I would like to greet you and greet your audience.
Thanks a lot. Dr. Misaya, what do you make of Georgia's strong reaction to the UK sanctions? Are these purely legal concerns, or is there a broader political context behind Tbilisi's response?
No, I guess there's a no-end response from the Georgian incumbent government, because I guess just Great Britain also just only just fomenting its responsibilities to be a strategic partner, strategic ally to Georgia, but also considering how Georgia protects and keep up its democratic values on its own concerns. I would like to mention that, well, this only just about words and general statement which was declared by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, and of course the Prime Minister's, which also he convened his speech to the Parliament of Georgia today. And I think so. It's like just about diplomatic, just about standoff between the Georgia and UK, mainly just about impede really Georgia's image as a democratic nations, because this situation between between Georgia and United Kingdom, just from historical point of view, were strategically just about very strong, very just substantive, and also UK provided a very enormous assistance to to promote Georgian national interest and even the Georgian national strengths at any level. But nowadays, this relation should be a bit, just about cool down.
In your opinion, how might this diplomatic spat affect Georgia's broader foreign policy goals, particularly its aspirations toward Euro-Atlantic integration?
Yes, what I mean, this I mean that it could impede Georgia's striveness to the Euro-Atlantic just about integration. It also just endangers the Georgia pro-Western foreign policy, which was, by the way, declared in ages of the Constitution. And it also constitutional privilege from Georgian side. The Constitution Article 78 directly just about underlines the Georgian government should do everything in order that Georgia becomes a NATO and European Union member state. And of course, this behavior from the Georgian government just directly contradicts this constitutional clause, which was determined and which was even just about entered by the today's government, 2020. It was named the Georgian ruling party, Georgian Dream, who also just proposed to include this article into the constitution, and the constitution was adopted. And the constitution is just about prevail of any just about governmental actions and behaviors.
Dr. Waktang Misaya, thank you very much for this discussion. We greatly appreciate your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Georgia's economy posted strong growth in the first quarter of 2025, with real GDP rising by 9.8% compared to the same period last year, according to the data from the National Statistics Office of Georgia. In nominal terms, Georgia's GDP for January to March reached approximately $7.7 billion. The GDP deflector for the quarter stood at 3.4%, while GDP per capita was estimated at $2,100. Key sectors driving economic growth indicated education, healthcare, and social services, as well as information and communication industries. Afghanistan is feeling the economic shockwaves of the Iran-Israel conflict, with a new World Food Programme report warning of rising food and fuel costs. Disruptions to trade through Iran are hitting household budgets hard, especially in urban and low-income areas. Our Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
Afghanistan's markets are feeling the ripple effects of escalating tensions in the Middle East. A new report from the World Food Programme reveals that the recent Iran-Israel conflict is having a direct impact on Afghan trade and household expenses. According to the WFP, imports through Iran have slowed significantly, affecting the flow of essential goods into Afghanistan. As a result, the prices of key staples like flour, rice, and cooking oil have spiked across the country. Diesel prices have risen sharply, now reaching 68.6 Afghanis per litre, a 15% jump compared to the same period last year. These increases are putting additional strain on everyday consumers, especially in urban and low-income areas. The report also sheds light on the country's struggling labor market. On average, Afghan laborers are finding work only about 2 days a week, earning just over 300 Afghanis per day, far from enough to cope with rising living costs. There is, however, a silver lining. Thanks to ongoing domestic harvest, vegetable prices have dropped in several regions. Still, the WFP notes that prices vary widely depending on location and accessibility. With regional tensions continuing to disrupt trade, Afghan households are bracing for a difficult summer. The WFP says it will keep monitoring the situation closely. Samin Bahis reporting for A News in Kabul, Afghanistan.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.